It is, oh, thank you, Diana. So today we have Advocacy Days for Education. And my name is Gabriela Ewing. I am the co-chair for the DDC is Developmental Disability Council. And I'm also the executive director of Hispanic Disability Support of Southwest Washington. And today I'm here with my friend Ivanova. Ivanova, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ivanova Smith. I'm with South Advocacy and Leadership Sale. And I am very happy to be here with you all today. And just remember that if you haven't already, click on that little globe. And yes, I have a little upset Zoom bomber here, Hildegard. So
Thank you, Ivanova. Thank you. Okay, so we are gonna start today with Kyle Matheson. And before we do that, we're gonna talk today about education, restraints and seclusions needed to be eliminated. Schools should be to be called CPS when students are neglected or abused by school staff. Seclusion should be clearly defined and reporting requirements need to be suited and enforced. Adults in the school need to be trained in de-escalation and create a video monitoring requirements of preservation for footage and at least one supervising adult as better safety measures on the school buses. And yes, very quick, I'm gonna share that I was in California with the public school district when my son was younger, and they had even cameras in the classroom, just for you guys to know. Only parents had access to those cameras when there was an issue for that. So just to have, for you guys to have that in mind when we do that advocacy, what we can ask to be implemented in the classroom and in the buses. So without more wait, we're gonna go to Kyle Matheson and Adrian Stewart.
Well, good morning there, everybody. My name is Kyle Matheson. I do live here in North King County as far and the 32nd Legislative District. Today, as you mentioned, we are going to be talking about education. And what does education mean? A lot of times, this is where a person starts, even before they go to school, and learning as the step goes through. Gabrielle already said about what are we doing, and I'm going to reiterate just that we don't want to be restrained. We don't want to be punished, but if it's in a way that is a way that we can be able, even though we're trying to learn our best, you can be able to do so. I'll go ahead and turn the next part over to my colleague and etc. from the head of the North Star, Miss Adrian Stewart.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for that introduction, and thank you to Gabriela and Ivanova for your great emceeing of this important event. My name is Adrian Stewart. I'm with the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. I'm a parent to two kids with developmental disabilities who have both struggled to get the inclusive education that should be happening in our state and the special education supports that they're legally.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to ask you to please talk slower so the interpreters can get everything. I just got a message. Thank you.
Lo siento. Yo tengo mucho hablar porque, yeah, I got a lot to say on this topic. So
I know we get so excited. Thank you so much.
I'm a parent of two kids. Yo tengo dos, two kiddos in the Tacoma School District here in Washington State, and I've struggled myself as an attorney, as a person who has a lot of resources, as a person whose first language is English, and as somebody who has a bachelor's degree in special education, to get my own children the supports and the inclusive education that they need. And I know so many other parents on this call today, so many other impacted advocates who have been segregated in special education classrooms. We're really behind in Washington State and getting our kids the inclusive education that they need and deserve. So I'm so thrilled to listen to the panel of experts and speakers that we've got lined up for you today. Thank you, Diana, for your incredible work on putting this Advocacy Day together. And I'm so excited to hear from each of you. So thank you.
Again, thank you very much, and hope we take it from there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And so now I think we have in the agenda Tanya from OSPI. Hi, Tanya. Would you like to introduce yourself, please? And go ahead, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Gabriela. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanya May, and I am currently the Executive Director of Special Education at the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. That's a long title. You may know the agency as OSPI. I'm very excited to be here with you today. Some of you may know already that President Biden has nominated our state's Assistant Superintendent of Special Education, Glenna Gallo, to be Assistant Secretary of Education at the national level. So Glenna is moving through her Senate confirmation process right now. And if she is confirmed, I will transition into the role of Assistant Superintendent of Special Education here at OSPI. And so that's a big change for all of us, for our state, certainly for me. And so I'm excited to partner with all of you as we move through this transition. When Stacy and Diana asked me to come and speak with you today, I wanted to talk about two of our initiatives. One is the Inclusionary Practices Project, and the other is our Cross-Agency Transition Collaborative. So Adrian did a great job opening with some of her story and what she's experienced as a parent and an advocate. And we believe that each and every student has the right to meaningfully participate in general education settings, both academically and socially. And inclusion is realized when all students are provided targeted services, supports, and accommodations that allow them to learn in general education settings, to interact with their peers, and to engage with the core curriculum. And Washington State certainly has been on a journey toward more inclusive practices. In 2018, Washington ranked 44th out of 50 states for inclusive practices of students with disabilities. And that was really concerning to all of our partners. So in response, in 2019, the Washington State Legislature established the Inclusionary Practices Project. This has been a multi-year initiative to support educator professional development for inclusionary practices. And so we are seeing changes in our state. From our 2018 baseline data, that was the first year that we started this project and looking at the data, our rates of inclusion for students with disabilities in general education for 80 to 100% of their school day has increased by 5% as of 2021. And for our pilot school districts, there's about 100 school districts that we've been working with. They've reported an increase over 11% as of 2020. The 2021 data are new, so we'll have an update on our pilot schools pretty soon. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is I know that it aligns with the priorities of this group. And also because there's so much that we can learn around the cooperation and collaboration of the inclusionary practices cadre. I've been honored to see our professional development providers who are supporting students and families, supporting educators, administrators, and even our school board members to think differently about what it takes to provide and to build inclusive learning environments. So I can pause there. I don't know. I'm going to look to Gabriella and Ivanova. We have a question, I think. Should we pause for questions?
All right, there's some questions. I don't see any hands raised. Oh, there's one. Josie,
Yes, we
you
have
have your hand raised. Sorry, Josie, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Josie Schindler, and when I was going to school, my school was really great, but I got bullied, and more kids and more kids and more kids are now getting bullied. In fact, they're getting bullied so much that they're bringing guns to school. I believe that our schools need to start maybe checking their bags, having a metal detector in every entrance and exit of the school, and making sure that every student has the opportunity to have a one-on-one, maybe mental health counselor with them. Because if a student is getting bullied and isn't being heard by a teacher or a bus driver or a superintendent or a principal, that problem is going to get worse. And it is getting worse, because in Graham, I saw on the news how a kid was being bullied, and attacked, and that's not fair, and yes, we all need an education of some sort, and whether that education is online or at the school, whatever it is, even the normal kids without the disability should have the right to an education. I had to stick up for myself. I came home, I can't count the number of nights that I came home crying, and my older brother would tell me
We have some.
comebacks and things like that. So to gain up on the bullies and say what, and stuff like that. So, I mean, education goes a long way, and everybody has the right to the education that they deserve.
Well said, Josie. Thank you for sharing that. And I do agree, part of thinking about inclusionary practices is around the mental health supports and also making sure that everyone feels safe. So thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you. Stacy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Tanya, I just wanted to say thank you again for coming today. We're so excited to work with you. I know that this transition into Glenna's position will be a big one. And just very briefly, if you could let us know, will you be going through a new strategic planning process to get input from a large swath of the community on your goals going forward as the new assistant superintendent? And, will you help us raise awareness around the issues that we bring to you with Superintendent Rakedahl, so that we can make sure that we can really make it more successful in terms of the outcomes for kids with developmental disabilities in particular in the public school system?
Thanks for that question, Stacy. Absolutely. I was involved as Glenna came into Washington. I had the opportunity to be a part of the priority setting that we engaged in with our partners, and that's an open forum. And whenever there's transition, there's an opportunity, right, to raise awareness and to make sure that we're listening to all partners and we're thinking about the need. And part of what you raised, Stacy, I wanted to also touch on today, just briefly about the work of that cross-agency transition collaborative. I've learned so much around thinking about employment supports, community access, the need for really cross-agency and local and regional collaboration through my work on the transition collaborative, and learning from each of you and from this community. And I think that transition collaborative and the local and regional transition networks that partners have set up are the model that we should be following when we think about advocacy in special education, and thinking differently about access to services and funding, and how students can best be included. And so I'm very excited about Senate Bill 5790. I've been working to support that. It's continuing to move, and I think that will be a really great opportunity to make sure that employment supports like school to work are available for students statewide.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you for the questions. Because we have a full agenda, I'm going to ask for any other questions to please put them in the chat so we can follow up with them. And I see one in there from Brandy. So we are going to, because if no, we will, like, this is a very in-depth conversation. And so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Thank you so much. And I see that Taylor has her hand up. So if you could put your question in there and we'll get to them. I promise.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for being here. And it's exciting, all the changes that are coming up. And yeah, we look forward to continue working with you and OSPI. And Ivanova, would you like to introduce our next speaker?
Yes, I would. All right. So our next speaker. Sorry, hold on. Yeah, the agenda disappeared. What the heck? I'm sorry. I had the agenda in front of me, and then it disappeared. I truly apologize.
Okay, Ivanova, this is Stacy, and our next speaker is Lisa Brodoff, who's an attorney with the Seattle University Law Center. And Lisa is a wonderful advocate, looking at some of the systematic issues that we have in due process for families, and we're really glad to welcome her here.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you all so much, and thank you for inviting me to speak. And thank you especially for all the advocacy you do on behalf of people with disabilities in our communities. And also I wanted to thank Tanya May for her talk, and I'm glad, thank you for staying for mine, because the advocacy I'm about to tell you about is directly with OSPI, and I'm certainly hoping you grant the petition we are about to talk about. So I'm here to tell you about Advocacy, Seattle University School of Law clinical program, and 13 other advocacy groups, many represented here, have filed on behalf of children and parents who are fighting for an appropriate education for their children. As you know, all children are entitled to a free and appropriate education, and children who have disabilities and who need support in school have the right to those supports in order to get that free and appropriate education. Until the 1970s, the educational needs of kids with disabilities were virtually ignored, and kids were often given no education at all, or relegated to separate classrooms in the basement where little or no teaching occurred. And that changed for the better in '75 when the Individuals with Disabilities Act was passed. So under the IDEA, I know you all know this, I'm just gonna give you this to help you understand the petition that we filed. Students, again, are entitled to a free, appropriate public education. So what happens when kids with disabilities enter the schools, public school systems? If their disabilities prevent them from getting an appropriate education, the school is required to develop an individualized education plan to meet the student's needs. And if the parent believes that the plan is not working, or they see their child failing to learn under the plan developed by the school district, parents have a right to challenge that plan, the IEP, in an administrative hearing at the Office of Administrative Hearings. It's not in the judicial branch court systems, it's an administrative hearing that OSPI provides through the Office of Administrative Hearings. So here's the problem. In Washington State, at that administrative hearing, that trial, the parents have the burden of proving that the school district is failing to provide an appropriate education to the child. And if the parent does not prove at the hearing by a preponderance of the evidence, by more than 50%, that the plan is inadequate, the child loses every time. The school district could sit back at the hearing and do nothing while the parent is put to the task of providing experts, evidence, and witnesses to show that the IEP is not working, is not providing the education, the school is not providing the education that their child needs to succeed.
Lisa, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Could you please talk a little slower for the
Yes.
interpreters? Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too. Like the last speaker, it's you get so excited to talk about this. So why is this a problem for the parents? Why is it a burden for the parents? Parents don't have any particular expertise on education planning. They often just know that their child is not progressing and that something is wrong, right? Something is wrong. Their child comes home miserable. They're depressed. They're not learning, but they may not be able to have the expertise to pinpoint why. Parents in these hearings are often not represented. They don't necessarily know how to put on evidence, how to deal with exhibits, how to examine and cross-examine witnesses and experts at the school district, and how to research the law. And even if they are represented, it's extremely costly and time-consuming to carry that burden. It requires often hiring experts to evaluate that IEP and the student's progress. It takes a great deal of time and a lot of money. And in the meantime, the child is continuing under the challenge plan to delay getting that appropriate education they're entitled to. And loss of time is loss of education. On the other hand, the school district has the power, has the expertise to defend its plan. They have educational experts on staff, and they have attorney representation through the entire process. The school district has ready access to all the information and documentation to defend the validity of the plan. They have the teacher, the child's teachers, their counselors, the records, etc. So basically, the hearing is stacked against the parents at every level. So what did we propose to change this heavy burden on the parents? We have petitioned the Washington State Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reichdahl, and we asked them, change using a rule, you can change the burden of proof in these hearings and put it on the school districts. Make the school districts prove that their plan is appropriate and provides a free, appropriate public education, rather than the parent having to prove the opposite. The school district, therefore, will have to come forward and prove their case. They have the expertise, they have the attorneys, they have access to the information, and then the likelihood is, and we have seen other states that have done this, that there'll be more earlier settlement of cases. That district, if they think, we have we might not have a good case here, they're going to settle earlier, and our kids will get a better response sooner. Or and it puts the burden where it really deserves. Let the school district show they provided FAPE. They provided the education rather than the parents having to prove the negative, which is so hard and unfair. So we have petitioned with 14 other code petitioners and asked the Superintendent Reichdahl to change the burden in all special education cases to the school district to make it fair to our students and our parents who are fighting for every day for an appropriate education for their kids. And so it's been filed, and the OSPI has until, I think it's March 28th, to decide whether to grant our petition and begin a rulemaking to change that burden. And we really hope you will support that. So we wanted to let you know this has been filed, and many of you have been on the front lines with us to get this petition in. So I'm happy to take some questions, but I just wanted to let you know about it. And I hope, Tanya, that your first act as the new assistant superintendent is to see that this petition is granted and that parents have a fair chance at challenging the IEPs. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. This is such an important issue that, yes, we need to have as soon as possible to be implemented and changed and implemented. And Adrian has a question for you. Go ahead, Adrian.
Professor Brodoff, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your expertise with us. And thank you for filing this petition on behalf of families all across the state. I wonder if you could speak briefly. We have a lot of families and impacted advocates here who for whom English is not their first language or their chosen or preferred language, especially at home. How would this petition impact people who have language barriers as well in schools? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, you've raised just another reason why putting the burden on parents is so unfair and why school districts should have it. How it would impact the parents is they could, if they think that the education is not being provided, they can request that hearing with OSPI, and then the school district then will have the burden without the parents having to say anything other than, here's why we don't think this education plan is working. The school district has to bring forward all the evidence about why it is, rather than the opposite. So that language barrier, though still there, it lessens the burden on parents. And so it would really help, it will really help in those situations, and help for the parents to, the school district to better explain in negotiations about what they're doing, and perhaps settling and making the plan better without the need for a hearing. That's what everyone hopes for.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Adrian. And this is such an important issue. I saw something in the chat. Stacy, oh no, Diana, she posted the petition that will be posted on Advocacy Day website later today. So you can click on that link and get that as well. Thank you so much for talking about this, and this issue is so important. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat so we can get to them, and we have a full agenda so we can go to our next speaker. And thank you so much for being here, Lisa. I can see the passion and just how the importance of this issue. And sometimes it's hard to go slower. Thank you. With that, we're going to go to Carrie Bassas from Seattle University, and Seattle University School of Law, the burden of proof, parents or district. Go ahead, Carrie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm Carrie Bassas. I'm actually the director of the Governor's Office of the Education Ombuds. I don't want to have to give Lisa's material. I appreciate it. I use a she, her, or they, them pronouns. For access, I'll provide a description. I'm wearing a colorful kind of egg theme turtleneck. I have a blondish bob, a woman in my mid 40s, and a colorful felt bulletin board behind me, and a poster of disability justice activist Anita Cameron. So today I want to share more about what the Governor's Office of the Education Ombuds does, as well as a bill that is before the legislature right now. So our office, which was directed before me by Stacy, was formed by the legislature in 2006 and was set up to help families and schools resolve conflicts, make sure that we reduce opportunity gaps for students. More than half of the students that we support are students with disabilities. And we serve on policy work groups and also provide outreach and training and coaching around education issues. So we are fewer than 8 people working full-time across the state, and everyone is really passionate about these issues. We have people with disabilities on our staff. I have a disability and was in separate special education until 3rd grade. I also am a lawyer now and a parent of a student with disability who's an English learner. These issues are really dear to my heart. One thing that we hear about in our office is that people don't know about our office. They have to find out about it from other parents, community groups like the ARC. They Google and find us. So we got the support of Senator Wilson. Thank you. We can move forward with this one. So I talked a little bit about our roles, but I can go over them again. So we listen to concerns and address questions about public K-12. We use informal conflict resolution tools to promote education justice. So that looks like mediation, facilitation, going back and forth about issues with schools and families so that families and students don't have to take on all of that work themselves and they're listened to. We provide training and workshops about K-12 and family engagement and advocacy, a lot of workshops and training about special education. And then we collect data, and our work is confidential, but we look at the kinds of calls that we're getting, and we identify trends that help us then make recommendations to the legislature, the governor, and others, including OSPI, about issues that they should address. Next slide, please. I'm starting to talk about this. Senator Wilson introduced a bill last session, which didn't go all the way through because it was amended by the House, but it came back this session, and it's an OEO, our Office of the Education Ombuds. Short is OEO, bill to raise awareness, and it's substitute Senate Bill 5376. And this bill, which is before the House Education Committee and will get a decision tomorrow as to whether it goes to the House for a vote, requires public schools to notify. That's through flyers, like a back to school packet, a website, students and families and employees, so teachers too, know, and other staff like para-educators about our services. And we would develop a template for these notifications to talk about what our services are, and we would translate it into at least Spanish. It will say we have the capacity to translate it into more languages than that. We are planning for that. the text is going to be short, so it makes it easy. And then here's the poster of Anita Cameron, who is a Black disability justice activist who helped fight for many rights, including accessible transportation, showing her protesting, sitting down, using her wheelchair, and organizing other people and looking hopeful. It's a collage, and the words on it are, "Civil rights are not given. You must fight to get them and then fight to keep them." And so that is Anita's motto about how to move work forward. Next slide, please. We also have been historically underfunded as an office. We have seen an increase in cases where we know students have lost learning, students have experienced bullying, students and families are navigating mental health concerns. English learner services haven't been provided in the way they need to. And so we asked the governor to fund us for 4 additional ombuds to meet that demand. Our outreach demand has increased 50 times. So we went from 5,000 to 250,000 people in the last 5 years. We are experiencing wait times. We could really use an ombuds at the intake level that can respond in the moment to urgent and complicated issues. And we know that there's so much work that needs to be done to make sure that our students are getting the education and safely that they need and the supports. So we have really been along for that ride as parents and as ombuds. So the governor's proposed budget and the Senate and Houses, there's a little technical error that I was addressing this morning, but essentially it looks at giving us, for a few months remaining in this fiscal year of 2022, an additional $114,000 that will help us get some people in there, additional people before schools wind down. It's really urgent. And then going forward, an additional $343,000, which would allow us to add 2 full-time ombuds and then part-time assistants and improve our outreach. So we're really excited about that possibility. We certainly needed this funding, even without the bill that would increase awareness about our office. We want to make sure that people have a positive experience. So thank you for allowing me to join you today. I'm happy to answer any questions, and please know that we're here for you too with any questions that you might have. And we're separate from OSPI or the district, so we can bring things to us and not worry that we are going to take them elsewhere without your permission.
Thank you, Carrie, so much for being here today and for sharing in such an important issue. How are we doing with the time, Stacy? Do we have room for a couple of questions, maybe? Our interpreter is getting a little overwhelmed and cannot do both right now. So maybe if we have a couple of questions and then the rest, put them in the chat so the interpreter can.
Actually, Gabriella, we should move on because we're a little bit behind here.
All right. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. And thank you so much, Carrie, for being here and for sharing in such an important issue. Ivanova, would you like to introduce our next speaker? And is I'll do it. So I don't see Ivanova. So our next speaker is Moses Perez from, actually, I need to say it correct because Moses Perez, I need to say it correct because in English it's different than Spanish. from Open Doors. And go ahead, Moses. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you.
Gracias, Gabriela. And thank you to everyone here that's present here today. Thank you to the co-presenters that are doing an awesome job. And thanks to, well, first of all, thanks to the ARCA Washington too for hosting this awesome event. Stacy, it's nice to see you, and Diana and Ivanova, Gabriela otra vez, es un placer. I'm here to talk to you all about language access in public schools. And I'll introduce myself first. My name is Moses Perez, and I am with Open Doors for Multicultural Families. I am the Advocacy and Civic Engagement Program Manager here at Open Doors. For those of you that do not know, here at Open Doors, we engage and partner with multicultural individuals with developmental and or intellectual disabilities, as well as their families. We do that by helping them navigate complex systems, sometimes broken and racist systems, as well as provide specialized programming that really is birth to life, as well as helping and walking alongside our families when they advocate for systems change. And while part of that change that our families are wanting to see is in their public schools in regards to language access, many of our parents not only face, ableistic attitudes, but also racist attitudes. For instance, one of our parents walked into her child's school and asked if a particular critical form could be translated. And she was told by the staff and actually by the principal herself that this was the USA, it is English, English, English. Even though this is a federal right that parents have to be part of their child's education, it's being denied multiple times over in multiple districts. So back in 2005, many of our families came to us, and to also, I believe Tina Orwell was there at that particular time, Representative Tina Orwell, who is our champion for language access, by the way, in public schools. And they began to talk about all these different barriers, cultural barriers that they were facing, as well as, of course, linguistic barriers. And they basically began to ask for educational equity through language justice. As we all know, family engagement has been studied probably for the last 50 years or something like that. And the difference between having meaningful family engagement and not is not only sometimes graduation, but sometimes it provides a school to prison pipeline type of scenario. And so currently, let me just bring you all up to speed. Language access, the bill number that we have currently right now in the Senate is House Bill 1153. And this bill, we introduced it last year, and it made it past the Education Committee in the House, but and then died sort of silently in the House Appropriations Committee. We were able to resurrect a few parts of the bill through a budget proviso process. I won't go into detail on that, but we did get three particular items out of the budget proviso, but we were really wanting to get the bill passed in its entirety this year. So it started in the House Appropriations Committee, and then thankfully made it through the House because of many of our partners who are helping us, including One America, the Interpreters Union or Interpreters United, Washington State Coalition on Language Access has been a key partner, that's WASCLA, as well as the Washington State Directors Association, OSPI, and also the Professional Educator Standards Board. Many of these partners, and there's more out there, and I apologize if I left, I know the DDC has been instrumental, Adrian Stewart, in helping us with language access. And so we're just so happy because this year we felt like we came back stronger and more united than ever, having more stakeholders at the table. And we did get it past the House Appropriations Committee. We got it all the way to the floor of the House, and it passed with pretty much a largely bipartisan vote of 83 to 13, and then made it on to the Senate. and recently passed out of the Early Learning and K through 12 committee there in the Senate, and now it's been referred to the Ways and Means there in the Senate. So we're just waiting for a date on that. But for those of you that are not up to speed on this language access bill, let me just tell you a little bit about what it does. It requires public schools in the state of Washington to implement a language access plan for culturally responsive and systematic family engagement, what I spoke to earlier. Number two, it also establishes a language access technical assistance program there at OSPI. And this language technical assistance program provides tools and resources to school districts across our state. It also it helps in the sharing of best practices around how to develop this language access plan to better serve their families and their students, as well as providing a model policy for that particular district around language access. The third thing it also does is the development and implementation of credentialing for spoken and sign language interpreters, ASL, for students, families, and educational settings outside of the classrooms, which includes a code of ethics and standards of practice. What this means is that I believe Adrian was mentioning that, you know, she has her doctorates in law and also quite a bit of a background in special education. And she said that she was struggling to understand the IEP and the whole process, right? You can imagine what many of our immigrant and refugee families that we serve, what they go through. Not only do they, most of the times are not afforded that type of education, but they, you know, English is not their first language. So I know that, you know, if I had to do an IEP in Russia with my child, and I didn't have education and I didn't understand Russian, then I would be, you know, we would all be in trouble there. And this is what many of our family members go through. And, you know, they said that they would get interpreters, but they were medical interpreters, or they were interpreters from a court system, or maybe it was just a part-time janitor sometimes, or a cafeteria worker. I've heard that one too. So you can imagine that, you know, our parents feel really like they don't have the tools to really be meaningfully engaged with their child's education. So this particular bill would help to establish this to develop and the implementation of this credentialing that would be housed at PESB and OSPI. So interpreters who want to work in school settings, and we met many of them, many of the interpreters say we want to learn the school setting, but currently no one in the state is providing this type of education and credentialing. So this bill would help to do that. One of my favorite parts, and I'll end with this, is that, you know, our families have been involved since 2015 in the creation of this bill, and then they've been with the bill through its legislative journey. But most of the times when a bill becomes a law, that's usually when community is, you know, told thanks, we got it from here. Well, this bill actually ensures that families continue to be centered and involved, not only in the creation of the bill, but also in the implementation of the law itself. So we're really excited about how throughout the journey of this bill, like I said, the creation and journey, families have been centered and prioritized. And when I say families, we're talking about multicultural families who English is not, you know, their first language. So yeah, I'm open to take any questions at this point. If you're maybe wondering how you can help with this bill, please talk to your local and state senators and representatives. You can follow HB 1153 online if you go to the Washington State Legislature page and you click, you know, I want to get involved, I believe is the name, how can I get involved, or, you know, to be involved, you click on that particular link and then you put the bill number in. And every time anything happens with that bill, it will alert you either through text or through email. And then once you do that, you know, you'll be notified and you could help us by signing in pro or testifying or maybe submitting a written testimony. So yeah, thank you, Gabriela. I'll go ahead and stop for now. I don't know if there's any questions out there.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Something happened here. Okay. Thank you so much, Moses. It is so important about
this bill to pass, because we are talking not only about Spanish, but there are so many languages spoken in our state. So this is a great importance, and I'm so happy to be able to do advocacy and signing pro of this bill, and also support the families here in Southwest Washington. Thank you so much for speaking on such a great issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriela. I just want to say one thing to Mike. Mike, shut him down.
Yes, that's awesome. I think we're gonna ask if you could please post any questions for Moses or any of our speakers in the chat. And go ahead, Ivanova, I'll leave the floor to you to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Okay.
It's okay, Ivanova, don't worry. So our next speaker is Andrea Catlett. I hope I said your last name correctly, from Disability Rights Washington. Thank you, Andrea, for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself and take the floor?
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Andrea Catlett. I'm an attorney with Disability Rights Washington, and I'm here today to talk about a budget proviso that we would like to see passed for supports for students with disabilities who are in distress. So we know that after the pandemic school closures, the federal government sent money to the states that could be used for education to solve COVID-related issues. And we're asking the state to use some of this money to provide additional supports for students with disabilities who are in crisis. As you all know, we have seen a lot of crisis and a lot of issues for students with disabilities during the pandemic. Students have experienced lost stability, trauma, some of them lost family members. Many students could not access school and experienced real learning loss. And that real learning loss is compounded because school has continued to be inaccessible, or schools offered ways to make up learning loss, and those ways to make the time up they weren't accessible either. So these students are really struggling, and we know that students acquired disabilities during COVID too. So we're in a space where students are still experiencing very real trauma from the pandemic and need additional supports to be able to access school. So the money in this proposed budget proviso would create a task force within OSPI that would look at supports for students in 3 different ways. And the first is that we would look at bolstering social emotional learning and mental health supports for students who have disabilities who maybe haven't yet been identified as having disability, or maybe have disabilities but just need some additional mental health and social emotional learning support. So maybe these students are struggling after COVID and they just need a little bit more support so that they don't go into crisis. And we've seen there's a big gap in our state generally for these students and for their families, right? So we really want to be able to bolster mental health and behavioral supports for students before they go into crisis. And so that's what this task force would look at this issue and figure out how to do that. Then we want to look at bettering and creating better supports for students with disabilities who are in crisis. So this might be students who need de-escalation in school, or it might be students who just need additional mental health support, but they are at a level where they need much more involved support. They might need a behavior plan, they might need an assessment for a behavior plan. And so this money would go toward that population. And then the third thing that this work group would look at would be supports to reduce and eliminate restraint and isolation use in schools. So we know last year, even though there was a pandemic, that there were over 3,000 students who were restrained and isolated in Washington. Now, restraint and isolation, restraint is when a teacher physically restrains a student, and there are laws around that. So you're not supposed to restrain a student in a way that restricts their breathing. So there are some laws around that, but we know that restraint is only supposed to happen if the student is about to harm themselves or harm others, right? And so if there are 3,000 incidents of this, if there are 3,000 students who are experiencing this, we know that it's a practice that goes much farther than imminent harm. So we want to reduce or eliminate that number. Isolation is when you put students in a room and you shut the door and the student is isolated in the room by themselves. Again, there are laws around this. The teacher is supposed to stand outside and monitor while the student is in there, but it's a very traumatizing experience for students, and we would like to see this practice eliminated altogether. Other states have eliminated it. Seattle Public Schools just eliminated isolation. So we know that just making a rule that says you can't do it doesn't mean that people are going to stop doing it, because they have to change the way they do things. And so this money would go towards a task force that would look at technical assistance to be in schools, providing supports for teachers so that they stop these practices of restraint and isolation. So those are the three ways that this work group would build up supports for schools. And the work group would come up with recommendations that would be done at the end of the year. So they'd be done before the 2023 legislative session. And we have funding in the House budget and in the Senate budget. We asked for $200,000, and I think there's $200,000 in the Senate budget and $150,000 in the House. But overall, so Margaret Lee asked a question about the incident. So it's 3,000 students. The number of incidents is closer to 25,000, according to OSPI. And the other important piece about the number, the data, is that we know that there's disproportionality in students who are restrained and isolated. So we're seeing students who are Black and brown, students who are homeless, and students who are in foster care are restrained the most. And of course, the students with disabilities who are restrained the most, but of students with disabilities, it's students who have disabilities and are Black, brown, homeless, or in foster care.
Yeah, so we see these incidents happening more with students of color, minorities, and so there is some kind of discrimination involved in that. So it's so sad and so urgent to really take care of this matter. And I know you have a question, Andrea. We are so behind in the schedule. Is that really pressing question?
Did you say Andrea or Adrian?
Adrian.
To Andrea. Yeah, no, I just wanted her to clarify the disproportionality piece, which she did. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea, for being here and sharing this very important issue. And yes, we need to jump in support of these measures taking place and support our students, because it's just too much for families and for children with disabilities. Thank you for being here. And please, if you have any questions for Andrea or any of the speakers, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. And right now we're going to continue.
And now our next
go ahead,
speaker
Ivanova.
is Ryan Gossman. and he is from the OSPI Early Childhood Special Education Coordinator Pyramid Model Report, and he will be talking about that. Thank you for being here, Ryan. Taking it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Ryan Guzman. I'm with OSPI as well. I support our early childhood special education programs, looking at children transitioning from Part C services early intervention, looking at how we're supporting our children in our preschool programs, and then that transition into kindergarten as well. So encompassing a lot of different pockets that we see our children in today. So I will share with you a short presentation around Washington Pyramid Model, which is one of a handful of initiatives that we are doing in special education to support our earliest learners. I hope to offer some really exciting updates on what we've been able to do. I think it's a little bit of a shift from some of the topics we've shared today, but it will align nicely with what Tanya started when she was on earlier today. So I'm going to share my screen. I apologize. I did change my presentation just a little bit in the flow so that it is a little quicker to meet the timelines today, and added a resource section so that we can access information after today's presentation. So this will be a bit of a redo maybe in some of what Tanya shared today. But as we inventory Washington's needs for accessing high quality early childhood settings, and if we take any considerations into inclusion, we have to think about early childhood. Early childhood settings in Washington state are met through a mixed delivery system that crosses agencies. OSPI as well as DCYF, Department of Children, Youth, and Families have a responsibility to serve and support children and family in Washington, and those are for children with and without disabilities. We have extensive conversations that we're having to lean into this. How can we ensure that our children with disabilities are being supported? How are we supporting families to access childcare, early care, educational experiences to ensure that we have equitable access to all environments? What you see on this page would be, again, just a reiteration of what Tanya shared this morning, where we are making progress with increasing access for children in our K-12 space. And so the call to action is, how do we then do that to support our earliest learners across the variety of settings, across a variety of systems, regulatory practices that OSPI does not have direct oversight of, but we have the responsibility to ensure that we are supporting our children and families in these spaces. Students between the ages of 3 to 5 in preschool settings are experiencing similar barriers that we are seeing in our K-12 systems and the trends that are associated with them, that there is a continued lack of access. So we need to interrupt that. And we need to do that with collaboration. At this time, 21% of children with disabilities in preschool settings are accessing a regular early childhood program. That is a program that has more than 50% of the children that have that do not have IEPs. In preschool settings in 2020, which would be last year's data, we don't have our 2021 data yet. We had over 50%, so 53.3% of our children that are being served in schools, school-based programs that are called developmental preschool programs. And that is where the majority of the peers in those programs have IEPs. This has a lot to do with access. School districts have control, or a locus of control of a developmental preschool program. When we start to collaborate and to look at community programs, there's more barriers that we have to continue to address to ensure how we can expand that continuum to get our children into these various settings, or to ensure that they're being supported in their natural environment. OSPI is committed to prioritizing the intersection and the connection between social emotional learning and inclusionary practices. This is a priority for us, And again, the complexity of supporting these systems across agencies is, did I say complex? It is complex. And so we continue to unpack that day by day. What we have committed to and what we'll share today within the Washington Pyramid Report and those activities are the utilization of coordinated intensive technical assistance. That means that we are aligning our practices across a variety of settings to share the same message and the same intent to support children and families, so that families don't have to talk one language when they're with a state preschool program, another when they're interacting with their special education program, rather that we have teams that are working together to support and elevate kids and families. We are focusing on system level and instructional coaching, so bringing forward experts in this space to ensure that we are supporting programs, administrators, practitioners to better engage and support families so that kids have access to these opportunities across setting, regardless of need. We're doing all of this with intent. I'd say evidence-based research is necessary. We need to do this in a grounded fashion. This isn't an idea. This needs to be grounded in research. So we're utilizing the stages of implementation science. We are integrating Washington Pyramid, which is a framework, not a curriculum, but a framework and a concept that can be utilized across settings and can be customized to meet the needs of community. And we are aligning our practices with the multi-tiered systems of support work that is being done through, I'm not just going to say Justin Pelosi, if you're familiar with his work, but OSPI is committed to creating a P-12 system. Preschool is essential to the partnership of K-12 success for children. We are pushing heavily in that space to ensure that that is included, and have aligned our work with theirs to ensure that we have schools and community partners engaged in this process so that we can have that success. We have to have communication. Sharing a visual for you right here. This is the Washington Early Childhood Special Education Pathways. We have developed a process for schools and for community partners to work together to build high quality early childhood experiences. We're focusing on incorporating practices of race and equity, trauma-informed care, social emotional learning, inclusionary practices, and we are also taking a lens of intergenerational trauma. How does that impact child? How does that impact family? How does that ensure, how does one ensure that they have developed an environment that is going to support the needs of those that are coming in, and the considerations that need to be in place? And I just think to all of the presenters before me and the connections to language access, and just in response to, experiences of bullying. In the past, I also am a mother of a child with a disability. I myself have a learning disability, and so to see my child experience those struggles, and as a mother, she's in high school, we've been doing this from elementary. It is a journey every day to support her in her success, to motivate her in her ability to believe that she can achieve beyond the expectations that are offered to her that are often much lower than I would appreciate. So with all of that in mind, what you see before you is a trajectory of opportunity to strengthen a system that has not been developed in the past in a way that we could. We have at the base preschool inclusion collaboration team, which is an opportunity for all partners to come together to advocate. And so I do want to leave you with that information as I close, that we invite you to partner if you have not already in this space. We have a collaborative team that is with DCYF, again, Department of Youth, Children, Youth, and Families, that is focusing on pulling together inclusive partners who are advocating in the space of inclusion in early childhood. And then beyond that, we start to bring in our school districts and our connection to community partnerships so that we can change systems, mindsets, and hearts to really include children. This leads to this, again, this extensive push to collaborate. Strategies to build change include that family and community partnership. We elevate family and community partners as most important, necessary to make change happen, especially in early childhood. Children cannot do this alone, and families cannot support children if they do not have the supports they need to be ready and whole themselves. Again, going back to synchronized facilitated trainings, we want to have consistency across our regions. We have 9 ESDs currently participating in a Washington Pyramid Model training and coaching sequence that ensures that regardless of region, all partners at every level are receiving the same information and have free access to that information so we can align our systems. And again, create those P12 systems, not a K12 system. Moving forward, what is Washington? Why are you here today, Ryan? This is one of our initiatives. And what we're doing is we're taking Washington Pyramid, and so Pyramid Model is a national research-based framework that Washington State received an intensive technical assistance grant in 2018. With that, our hope was to address what was just spoken to, the disproportionate rates of this suspension and expulsion in our early childhood program for children with disabilities. We don't have data on that because there is not a requirement across systems to take that data. This is an opportunity for us to address some of these disproportionate situations that are happening for children with disabilities, to be able to ground action in data and decision making. We want to address social emotional needs of children with disabilities. We want to address the social emotional needs of the practitioners that are supporting our children so that we can build competence and confidence with this space to ensure that all children receive access, because every person is ready to accept them and every environment is catered to meet their needs. You can read the words, but let me do that for you if you aren't able to see screen. The Washington Pyramid Model is not a curriculum package, but a collection of programs and evidence-based classroom practices selected by experts in early childhood research to support optimal development and prevent challenging behavior. That last word, challenging behavior, is a bit of a trigger for us, for me. I see challenging behavior as a perception of the value of the person that sees that behavior. That's my personal opinion. I think that we have to think about that as well within the environment. Why is that behavior perceived as challenging? Is it a value disagreement? You know, my value doesn't match your value. Is it a cultural misunderstanding? These are things that we need to lean into, and through our work, we are addressing that through explicit training. As a person that is forward-facing, as a white cis woman, I might pass and have better experiences than others that are coming through and in any other diversion. I said diversion is a new word that I'm making up, but as a difference. How do we move forward? Really leaning into repurposing and allocating funds and supports with our RECP, means regular early childhood programs. One of the barriers that we face is funding. Early childhood special education is partially funded because it is a supplementary support to general education. Unfortunately, basic ed funds start in kindergarten, not in preschool. So that is where we find difficulties with districts developing programs. And that's why we have to collaborate and utilize existing programs and build relationships where we may not have them. So creative and flexible thinking is necessary. And that goes to my point of collaboration and communication, authentic engagement across a diverse range of partners. We can't do this alone. We have to do this together. That is how we raise children. That is how we build community, is to nurture and elevate family. We're utilizing data, and we have to build data systems. And that is something that we are doing within the Washington Pyramid Model work, is developing a data system that every partner engaged can speak to and generate information and synthesize reports that can help us guide change. We want to do this at the program, at the system level. We want to be able to bring this back to legislator as well and to say, this is a space that needs to be funded. This is an area of work that we need to support. Access and equitable engagement and quality programs for all children within the space is necessary. And we have to do this together. Implementation of practices, going down to fidelity. We have to have consistency of fidelity. That's why we have our Washington Pyramid Model Training and Coaching Network. If you are interested in any of this, please let us know. We have very strategic and in-depth plans for this work, and I recognize within 10 minutes, which I probably am just like right teetering over if I haven't already, there's just too much to share. But contact information is here. I am Ryan Guzman, and Julie Dean is our early childhood special education inclusion specialist. She is leading the Washington Pyramid Coaching Network, and collectively we are doing a great lift here, sharing some information. I'll just scoot through this. This is available to you in the handout that I provided. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of grounded work that we want to be able to have at your fingertips to guide through. And if you have questions, just know we're here. This is an interactive web page that we have on our website, and I'll drop all the links in just a moment. If you're curious about your location, what's happening in your space, you'll see the initiatives that we've developed, who's a part of them, and if there's someone near you or something that you would like to participate in, please let us know. This is the Preschool Inclusion Collaboration Team. Contact Julie Dean. We'll get you into the right hands, but we will be convening in May, and we'd love to have you and your voice at the table so that we continue this work and again, cross those lines. And last, there's a very inspiring video that is led by Dr. Phil Strang. He was our intensive technical assistant advisor around professional development and coaching. He has been a North Star for us in developing this system. Washington Pyramid. What's the value added? You may not have heard that anyway, but just moving forward. And then this is our theory of action. We are aligning all of this work. Washington Pyramid is a part of all of our projects. We are bringing this into kindergarten. We are bringing this concept into kindergarten and again, aligning it across systems. So we just want to make sure that you have the information that you need to go back and just, if this piqued your interest, reach out and then also just access those resources. That's it.
Thank you so much, Ryan. So much information and very important issue. Thank you for being here and for sharing. And please, if you have any question for Ryan or any of our presenters, please refer to the chat. And as you saw, we're already in time check. And with that, we're going to go to Ramona Hatterford from the ARC of King County, Coordinate Recruitment and Enrollment. Go ahead, Ramona.
Sorry, I had a hard time getting myself unmuted. Hi, everybody. I'm Ramona Hattendorf, and I have much smaller presentation if I can just get it going here. Okay. All right. So as you just heard, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of exciting that's happening around building inclusionary practices and starting with early learning, because individuals with Education Disabilities Act, IDEA, it actually starts at birth. There's services, there's intervention and support services for 0 to up to age 3. And then special education services start in preschool at age 3 and continue through age 21. So there's a lot of, it's all tied together. So I wanted to talk to you about something that's called coordinated enrollment and recruitment. And honestly, I always struggle to remember what this is, but the upshot is that statewide, people are talking about how can we help families connect to really high quality early learning in their community. So that's what they're trying to do. And then the questions right now are where to start with all this. So finding an early learning option can be pretty difficult for parents, especially if they need to coordinate childcare, drop off or pick up for other children. there's a lot of different considerations that parents face. Like each program might require different applications. So they're having to apply to Head Start, you apply to ECAP, you put in for your school district for developmental preschool. Some programs involve really long bus rides, and that really is something that a lot of parents that I talk to anyways don't like. They're really very leery of those long bus rides. And some programs offer more like child well-being or family support. Each program is different. And so there's a lot for parents to take in. So if we were going to have this nice program that helped parents find a good program that works for them in their community, would it include inclusion? Like, or how much into inclusion are they going to go? And this is important because some programs are fully inclusive of children with and without disabilities, and others are completely segregated. This is unfortunately a reality that we're facing. And it's important to understand because the research is very definitely on the side that inclusive early learning is really where you want to be. That's where a lot of your skill development can go. And in fact, if you don't have inclusive early learning, you might lose out on some of the skill development that you made if you had 0 to 3 services. So often preschool parents, they aren't even familiar with laws like IDEA or Section 504 or the ADA. And I'll explain those in just a minute. Parents may not know their child's rights to inclusive education or equal opportunity to benefit. They may not understand the research that says inclusion is important. And often providers don't know the laws either. I mean, not really. So what do those terms mean that I just said? We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we are on time check. IDEA, that's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And the real takeaway for, especially for preschool with this, is the go-to placement option should be wherever the child would go to preschool if they did not have a disability. And then you push in supports and individualized instruction there. So if they would normally go to the Boys and Girls Club preschool program, theoretically, they could get support there. It's not the way the system is working for people, but theoretically, if there's an ECAP program, they would qualify based on their IAP status. And theoretically, they could get push and supports there. So that's what IDEA, the takeaway from IDEA is. Section 504 is an anti-discrimination law, and that is shorthand for Section 504, one part of a bigger bill called the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And this is the one that established FAPE, Free and Appropriate Public Education. FAPE is also an IDEA, but it started with Section 504. And this one says that if a program takes any federal money, it could be a grant, it could be a lunch program, any federal money, then they can't discriminate based on disability. They must provide kids with an equal opportunity to benefit. And if it's a school, they must provide free and appropriate public education. By the way, that also applies to any of your after-school programs. If they are taking federal money, they cannot discriminate. And then you have ADA, which is the Americans with Disability Act. And there's 2 sections of that that are really important for preschool. Title II says state and local governments cannot discriminate against people with disabilities. This applies to services, programs, and activities. So say like in Seattle, there's a Seattle preschool program. If they're offering a Seattle preschool program with kids without disabilities, it has to be fully open to kids with disabilities. They can't say, sorry, it's not designed for you. Can't do that under ADA Title II. And Title III is the one a lot of people are more familiar with, and that's the one around private businesses that are called places of public accommodations. So these could be businesses, childcare centers fall under this. And that's where you can't—
Ramona, it's Stacy. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Take just a breath. The interpreters are saying that you're going just a tiny bit too fast.
Okay.
But we're so grateful. Thank you.
Okay. So Title III, ADA, that's the one with reasonable modifications. So you can't discriminate, but it has to be reasonable. You can't ask somebody to completely redesign a program. You can't ask someone to take on lots of new staff. And so that one's open to interpretation. But back to whatever the CRE is, and that's the goal for parents to find high quality early learning in their local community. They want to simplify things for families. For instance, if you live in Great Town, what options do you have nearby? But there are a lot of considerations for families of students with disabilities. Like for instance, how does coordinated recruitment work with IEP teams? If the IEP team, that stands for the Individual Education Program, if IEP teams direct families into segregated programs, what options do families have? Some of the questions I have is, will community-based programs truly be accessible and inclusive? Will school special education teams push in services to community providers? How will coordinated enrollment and recruitment work for students with disabilities? And what is high quality early learning? Throughout, where everyone has always talked about high quality early learning, but the state does not have a defined definition of what this means. And it doesn't say whether or not inclusion is even part of the definition. And so who gets to define quality, and it's quality for who? Who is included in this? So what's up right now? Right now, there's stakeholders, they're meeting about this idea of coordinated recruitment or coordinated enrollment and recruitment. OSPI, which is the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and they oversee the preschool special education services in the K-12 system. And another agency called DCYF, which stands for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. They oversee Head Start, the state's Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program. You might know this as ECAP. They oversee Working Connections childcare licensing, the State Quality Rating Program. These two agencies are holding meetings with stakeholders. And there's lots of childcare and preschool providers there, but there aren't a lot of parents there. And there aren't a lot of people who necessarily are coming from the space of, I have a child with a disability. I have to figure out what IDA and 504 and ADA is. I don't know any of this. And I just want to be able to go to work. And I want to be able to have a really good place for my child to be with their friends in the neighborhood. How do I make that work? And so there aren't a lot of voices from some of the places that parents in our community are coming from. So I'm here mainly to let you know that these discussions are happening. They want to make it easy so parents can connect with quality early learning. They aren't necessarily plugged in to some of the parent voice of people who have gone through this or currently gone through this. Doreen with PAVE, she's also been in some of these meetings, so she's there if you want to talk to Doreen, or you could talk to me. But my big question and my takeaway is, what would help you or would have helped you find quality, inclusive childcare or preschool? Because we want to be able to inform all these stakeholders that are meeting. We want to be able to give some insight into OSPI and DCYF. I'm like, hey, if you're actually a parent and you're actually navigating this and you're trying to find a placement next month or in 2 months or 3 months, what would be helpful for me and how are you going to help me out? So if you have ideas, you can drop them in the chat. You can also email them to me. I would be happy to hear from you. And then I'm sure Doreen and I would also be happy to give you updates on whatever this group decides to do to make it easier to find childcare. Thanks. All done.
Thank you so much, Ramona. It's such an intense topic that like we get so passionate, and thank you for being here and sharing such important information. Thank you for all our presenters that have been here today, and we're not done yet. Go ahead, Ivanova. Would you like to introduce Diana? And please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat so we can get to them. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Ivanova.
Hello, thank you everyone. And you can also email the presenters if you have questions. You can email your questions. Now our next presenter is Diane Stadden, who will be going through our bills of interest. Thank you, Diana, and take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I know that we are running just a tad bit late today. I'm going to share my screen to show you where we are with our bills of interest. And currently we're running toward a cutoff. I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom of the page so that you can see this. Oops, a little bit too far. We have passed some of the cutoffs, the ones that where the bill started had to get out of that house So that part's done, and we're on the second half of it has to go through the other house and make it through. Most of the bills have been being heard in policy committees right now, because Thursday is the cutoff for them to get out of those policy committees. And so there are a couple of hearings, but most of it is executive session to move bills out of those committees before the cutoff deadline. And then on Monday, if they had to go to a fiscal committee, House Appropriations or Senate Ways and Means, then they have to be out of those committees by Monday. So then they will go back to being on the floor all the time, trying to pass bills out of that house that they're in. And so bills can die anywhere in the process of those three cutoffs, but we'll be watching them, and we post these bills on our website at arcwad.org, and you can hover on Advocacy Day, or Advocacy, I'm sorry, and click on the bill tracker, the first one. And I'm not going to go over all of these bills, but you can see we've got a lot of smiley faces, a lot of bills that are still going. And in their status in the notes, you can see that some of them have been scheduled for public hearings, but you will see a lot that say exec, and that's the committees trying to get the bills passed out of their committee so that they can keep going and make it to the floor. So you can access these bills there, like I said, on the website. And I'm going to stop sharing this one because I want to touch briefly on the budget. So we had the governor's budget that came out back in December. And then we had to wait for all of the House and Senate budget committees to figure out what they were going to put money toward. And we've had a really good revenue forecast for our state. We got lots of money to work with. They're kind of overflowing with money to work with. And so we have been really pushing. Our main push, as you'll see in bold here, that the governor put in was to do total caseload forecasting for Developmental Disabilities Administration, or DDA, services. And that would be so helpful to our community to be able to have people get services. Currently, we are number 41 in the nation for providing those Medicaid waiver services. And yet aging and long-term care provides the same services, and they're number 2 in the nation. And the only difference is we are not in the caseload forecasting, and they are. So legislators are listening, but they're trying to do this in pieces rather than just do the whole thing like they should, especially with the cash flow the state has right now. So when you look at the budget, there's some different proposals around caseload forecasting, some of it just doing pieces of it. But the main one we're pushing for is for the full caseload forecasting for DDA. There are lots of other different things that are really good that are in the budget. And you can review this on our website as well, and see all the different things that we have fought for and watched getting funded. When you look at this, one of the things you may notice is bills. Now, bills need to get funding too. That's why they have to go through House Appropriations and Senate Ways and Means. And so when you see a bill and you see, well, look over here, it's only funded in the Senate column. Well, that's because these are Senate bills. And so when they put their budget proposals out, you will not see in the House budget money for a Senate bill, and vice versa. So when they still now have to come together for a conference and kind of look at all of these things that are in it and decide which things to put in the final bill. And so now is really a time to make your voice heard with Senate Ways and Means and House Appropriations, the Budget Committee staff, or Budget Committee, I'm sorry, that are leading these. Representative Ormsby and Senator Rolfus are really important people to contact and let them know what you think is important to make sure gets kept in the budget. So I know we're running out of time, so I am going to turn it over to Jessica now. And let me stop sharing so that she can share with you now.
After this briefing, you have many options to advocate with your legislators. You can schedule a Zoom meeting with your legislators. Email today's information to them. You can also email your legislators about bills that are important to you and to set up appointments with them. There are no hearings to participate in this week, but legislators will be on the floor. Let's talk about how to get you connected in what's going on in chambers. On the main page at www.legwa.gov, you would click on House Floor Calendar. Once there, it shows you the display boards for both the House and Senate. If they are working, the boards will display the information about whatever bill they are voting on at that time. Otherwise, it will say that they are at ease, meaning they not working on voting. They may be at ease for the purpose of caucus, for lunch or dinner, or they may be at ease until the next day. When they go in caucus, that means that all the Democrats go into a closed room, talk about the bills coming up and how they plan to vote on any amendments and the final bills. The Republicans do the same thing in another room. Scrolling down, you will see the list of bills that they plan to pull to the floor for a vote. These bills are on second reading. If there is an A in front of the bill number, that means that floor amendments are being proposed. By clicking in the A, you can read the amendments being proposed once the bill is pulled to third reading and is voted on by members. On the right-hand side, there is a column titled Floor Action. If it has already been voted on, you will see that there, at the top of the page, you will see a link that says Go to Senate Reports. By clicking on that, you will find the same information about Senate bills on second reading. When they are on the floor voting, you can go to the main page. Scroll down to where scheduled hearings and floor sessions are listed and click on View Video. This will take you to the TVW page that is showing that floor action for voting. Advocacy Day is a project of the ARC of Washington State and funded by the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. Be sure to join us for future Advocacy Days. Register for each Advocacy Day on our website at www.arcwa.org Advocacy Days. We want to make sure you are satisfied with Advocacy Days, so be sure to fill out our feedback form. Your feedback helps us to continue improving and helping your voice to be heard. Let's walk through it together. Start at www.arqua.org Advocacy Days. Scroll down to the smiley faces that say your feedback matters and select click here. The link to the feedback form in Spanish is right below the link to the English version. Start by putting in your email address. Next, you select the advocacy day you're giving input for. Then you respond if this is your first advocacy day or not. Next, you pick the smiley faces that answer how you feel about the virtual advocacy day. Then you submit the form. Just as simple as that. Your input helps Diana and the ARC to know what you like, what you don't like, what is helpful, and what is not helpful. You can learn about these and more ideas to get involved on our website at www.arqua.org and click on Advocacy Days. You can also contact us at sale@arqua.org or diana@arqua.org if you need help. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Jessica. And thank you, all of you, for hanging out with us. We went over the time. Yay! Margaret Lynn says like, yeah, finally. So thank you so much for staying with us. And we ran out of time, but it is so important to have this conversation and to know what we need to do to keep pushing forward for our children with education. Thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to fill out the feedback form and to register for next week on healthcare.